thank you all. Thank you for being here. I know some of you have to be here and some of you are just here, so I appreciate that. I wanted to offer a disclaimer first. So, yes, my talk is on a poetic look at pressure, but I am by no means, a creative writer, we'll say. Some might argue with me here, but I didn't go to school for writing. I don't have an MFA in creative writing. If I went back to school though, I would pursue that. I would want to do that because I am interested in it. But I do teach in the English department here. I do teach writing, but I don't teach poetry. So why am I talking to you about pressure from a poetic lens? It's twofold, really. One I sort of already hinted at is that I like to write. So one way that I myself relieve pressure is by writing. I sit down almost every day, and sometimes it's just a thought dump in one of my mini journals. I have a ton, and I just write. But I found that I really like to write poems. I don't know, there's something about, to me, poetry that just seems easy. Because I can just put things down. It can be a fragment, it could be a single word, it could be really short, but I have a lot of creative license in it. And so I want to talk to you today about pressure through a poetic lens as the way that I myself relieve pressure, but then also ways that you too can sort of do this on your own time. So the very first kind of poem or poetry that I want to talk to you about is acrostic poetry. And this is one of my favorite things to do. So on my handout it says that acrostic poetry is a form in which names or words are spelled out through the first letter of each line. And so I've given you two sort of visual examples here that I found on the internet. One is from Pinterest, the one about boundaries, and the other is just from Google. I think it was Zeffler.com. And so we have one where clearly it spells out boundary, and the title is What is Boundary? And so across the side here, you can see that boundary is spelled out, and the first word of each line begins with whatever letter comes next in the spelling of boundary. So it says, be aware of what is unacceptable and normalize saying no. Do what is best for you and know that it's not your responsibility to sacrifice yourself for others. The other one is on autism and says, always understand that I am still me. The last one is by Edgar Allan Poe, whom I assume many of you have probably heard of before. And his acrostic word might be a little hard to point out, but do you see it? What's he spelling out there? Elizabeth. Okay, so he has this name, Elizabeth, which happens to be my name too, but he's not responding to me. But an acrostic by Poe here is a response to someone named Elizabeth, and he calls it out in the third line. So in this poem, he's responding to another poet and her poem called Warning. And in it, she is sort of giving this discussion of love that, she's done with love, no more. And he's saying, well, you shouldn't give up so quickly, that love is a source of living. So as a response to her, he writes this poem spelling out her name along the side there. So in true relieving pressure fashion, I sat in my office one day, 2 weeks ago, and I said, okay, let's write an acrostic poem with pressure being the word that we use. And I thought about all of, the things related to pressure that come to my mind. And the first, even when Dr. Lang mentioned this opportunity with the theme of being pressure, I thought immediately of Queens Under Pressure. Do you know the song? Kind of starts off, when you first hear it, you might think, oh, it's Vanilla Ice, right? But it's not, because they sound very similar. That came to mind first. And then I thought, when I teach Writing 101, there's this article by William Zinser, and he talks about college pressure. And he talks about all the different kinds of pressures that students face, from parental, financial, peer, etc. So all of that was sort of in my head. So this is first and final draft here for you. So it says, peer on peer, ruminating over what's going to be lost, forced upon, or the expressed desires of one's parents. Slowly losing the self I've taken this long to craft, so I can meet those expectations. Underneath it all, I'm shook, mind racing, I'm ready to explode. So on this first side here, I wanted to just introduce you to acrostic poetry. Again, for me, I've written lots of these over, I don't know, the last several years, because it's one of the quickest ways for me to, if I'm harping on something, I pick that word, I put it down, and I just go with it. So on the back page, the second kind of poem that I want to introduce you to is called a found poem. And so these take existing texts and refashion them or reorder them and present them as poems. And so that came from poet.org. I receive an email from them every morning with a poem of the day, which I geeked out on one earlier with Mr. Brantley back there. And he said, "Are you going to share this one today?" And I said, "No, though it would have fit." But these poems are like borrowing from what's already been said. So whether it's other poetry or some other literary work, or newspapers, notes, something from a textbook, graffiti, whatever. If it's been written and it's out there and you can borrow it and refashion it and sort of put it together in a new way, it's fair game. That's found poetry. So the example I have for you here is from a Hemingway reader, The Sun Also Rises by Robert Fitterman. So, The Sun Also Rises is by Hemingway, and what Fitterman has done is he has erased everything in this text except for the statements that begin with I. He has only kept the I statements. So here in Book 1, Chapter 1, we are left with nothing but I statements. And so just as a little context, in this chapter, Hemingway's introducing the narrator and these three characters. One is the narrator. And so he's talking about how he's come to know this one particular person who was a former boxer, and a little bit about his past life, how he wanted to leave his former wife, and then she ended up leaving him, and now he's with this other woman who's a bit forceful with her opinions. So they're at dinner. And so they're talking about potentially taking this guy's trip. And so after all of that, you're left with just these I statements that says, "I am very much impressed by that. I never met anyone of his class who remembered him. I mistrust all frank and simple people. I always had a suspicion. I finally had somebody verify the story. I was his tennis friend. I do not believe that. I first became aware of his lady's attitude toward him one night after the three of us had dined together. I suggested we fly to Strasbourg. I thought it was accidental. I was kicked again under the table. I was not kicked again. I said goodnight and went out. I watched him walk back to the cafe. I rather liked him." Kind of odd, right? So if you've ever read Hemingway's Book 1, Chapter 1, The Sun Also Rises, just pulling out those I statements gives a really interesting look at sort of what was going on potentially. And if you hadn't read it, or if you had, you know, we could talk here about sort of the pressure that would be, you could kind of pull from there. He's wanting to plan this trip, but the lady friend is the one kicking him under the table, like, "You're not taking my man on a guy's trip and introducing him to some woman from the United States that could show him around." But you don't really get that from this, but you get that someone's getting kicked, something's not going well, and nonetheless, you still kind of like the guy. So to end this discussion, I once again sat down and thought, okay, how could I do a found poem on pressure? And again, I already said, music came to mind, Queen, the lyrics from Under Pressure. And so then I went to Google and I started to Google lyrics that contain the word pressure. And so what I ended up with is a list of songs borrowed from everything from Queen to Lizzo. And I've pulled out sections of each musical piece and strung it together in this final found poem, A Lyrical Look at Pressure. So, pressure, pushing down on me, pressing down on you, no man asked for. Under pressure that brings a building down, splits a family in two, puts people on streets, smoking on the finest dope, drank until I can't no more. Really, I'm a sober soul, but I'm with my homies right now. And we ain't asking for no favors. Rush your brother quick, then laugh about it later. Really, I'm a peacemaker, but I'm with my homies right now. Someone fills up your diary. Can't you just turn up on time, please? And make something we can vibe with, no pressure. $1,500 for the studio, but no pressure. No pressure, no pressure. You ain't never liked me, cause you ain't seen nobody like me. Can't go wrong with the right team, no pressure. You ain't never gonna get no better. No better, no pressure. Eh? No pressure. Never graduated, but I school 'em like professor. Growing up, the world always told me I was lesser. Growing up, the world told me I could not address her. Gangsters put that heat to your head like a hairdresser. But under the pressure, I hid my nerves and it worsens. I worry something is gonna hurt us. Under the surface, the ship doesn't swerve as it heard how big the iceberg is. Under the surface, I think about my purpose. Can I somehow preserve this? Line up the dominoes, a light wind blows. You try to stop it tumbling, but on and on it goes. But wait, if I could shake the crushing weight of expectations, would that free up some room for joy or relaxation or simple pleasure? Instead, we measure this growing pressure, keeps growing, keeps going, because all we know is pressure like a drip, drip, drip that'll never stop. Pressure that'll tip, tip, tip till you just go pop. But it's bad o'clock. Yeah, it's thick 30. I've been through a lot, but I'm still flirty. Is everybody back up in the building? It's been a minute. Tell me how you're healing. Because I'm about to get into my feelings. How you feeling? How you feel right now? I've been so down and under pressure. I'm way too fine to be this stressed, y'all. I'm not the girl I was or used to be. I might be better. But I wish somebody would have told me that thighs of thunder meant normal human thighs. The freaking pressure I was under to lose my appetite and fight the cellulite with Hunger Games like every night. If I could go back and tell myself when I was younger, I'd say, hey dummy, I know Victoria's Secret. Girl, you wouldn't believe. She's an old man who lives in Ohio, making money off of girls like me, cashing in on body issues, selling skin and bones with big boobs. I know Victoria's Secret. She was made up by a dude. So, can't we give ourselves one more chance? Why can't we give love that one more chance? Because love's such an old-fashioned word, and love dares you to care for the people on the edge of the night, and love dares you to change our way of caring about ourselves. This is our last dance. This is ourselves, under pressure, pressure. So I hope in that you've seen all the different kinds of pressure that these lyrics talk about. Everything from peer pressure, right? Really, I'm a sober soul, but I'm with my homies right now. From family pressure to work pressure, self-induced pressure, societal pressure to fit in and to look a certain way. So again, sort of my unconventional look at pressure from how I deal with it creatively. And then I hope that perhaps you all can, if you like, maybe try a found poem or acrostic poem. So thank you.